You don't outsell the competition, you out-question them.
Hi everybody and welcome back, and I'm delighted to have with me Paul Watts. G'day Paul.
G'day John, how are you mate?
Delighted to have you on the show, Paul. You have a real fix on consultative selling and you think it's absolutely the way to go. Can you just tell me why and what you think consultative selling really is?
I'm a huge advocate for consultative selling, John. Consultative selling for me is the most obvious way to sell. And the reason I say that is because when you are using a consultative approach, by the very definition of what consultative selling is, you are taking the time to ask questions of your customer. You're developing a deep understanding of the customer's needs and challenges and objectives. And then you're using your critical thinking and problem solving skills to solve and meet those needs, challenges, and objectives.
Okay, there's a lot of debate in this day and age, and in fact, I talk about three types of selling. One's the old product sale type model, one's consultative sale, and then I talk about disruptive selling, and I know you do too. So, do you see disruptive selling as something different to consultative selling, or do you see it as complementary?
I think consultative selling is a precursor to disruptive selling, because I think if you do enough consultative selling, you start to see patterns and trends that are emerging in your industry, and using that information, I think you have the perfect opportunity to disrupt. But I would argue that it's very difficult to be disruptive if you haven't first been consultative.
I think I'd agree with that. We have to learn how to be good consultative salespeople before then we can grow to being disruptive selling specialists. So I think I agree with that. However, I think one complements the other and one flows to the other. So anyway, let's not go into too much of that debate. Tell me more about consultative selling and the way you see it.
Yeah. So John, when I started my career, I left engineering and I moved into technical sales. And right away, I recognized that selling, like engineering, was a process. And if you followed that process, it was simple. And it was actually the same process. And that was the thing that really intrigued me about selling. If you look at the engineering process, you can't solve or engineer a solution without first understanding the problem. And how do you understand the problem? You ask lots of great questions. Consultative selling is exactly the same thing. Think of it like a doctor's diagnosis process. So, when you're not feeling very well, you go see the doctor. What does the doctor do? They diagnose you. They ask questions. You provide them answers. They ask more questions. You provide them more answers. And they keep asking questions until they get to what they believe is the root cause of the problem. And then, and only then, do they prescribe a solution. Consultative selling works exactly the same way. So a consultative selling professional is asking great questions, is developing that deep understanding of the client's needs, challenges, and objectives, and then prescribing solutions to meet those needs, challenges, and objectives.
That makes a lot of sense to me, and I think that's a good analogy, the doctor analogy. One of the frustrations with me is in working with a lot of companies, we work hard to get people to understand that it's all about asking questions and bringing insight through those questions to help take the customer through a bit of a thinking journey to help them understand how, once we understand the problem, how we might go about solving that problem without ever talking about product. But the frustration of me is people jump into product too quickly.
I think, as Thibaut Chanteau said, if you want to, you should really leave your product in the car, and you should maybe open and crack a window so that it can breathe, but leave it there. Go into the meeting. You're not there to talk about your product. You're there to talk about the customer.
It's tough though, isn't it? It's tough.
It is.
So how do we get our mind right to really focus on being a consultative salesperson, but being there asking questions and not jumping in wanting to talk about our product? It's it's a mindset situation, isn't it? How do we do that?
It is a mindset, and I think part of it is preparing for the call. It's taking the time before you go into that meeting to write down all the questions that you would like to try and find the answers to during that meeting, because until you've got all of those answers, you're really not in a position to be prescribing anything or to be selling anything.
I think preparation is absolutely key to it. It's still a mindset issue, but if you've got the preparation done, then it's probably going to help you focus more on that. That the issue, another issue to that respect, a lot of people script. So here's all my questions, and they sit with the customer and say, right, my next question is, and the problem is you don't necessarily know what the next question is until you got the answer to the last question. So in my mind, be a good consultative salesperson is have the skill and capability to ask questions and then be in the moment with the customer, so that you're not referring to your notes. You're actually there having a conversation of value and creating value for the customer through the questions you ask. And that takes a lot of practice and a lot of role playing and so on. And we talk about this as if it's easy. You just go and ask lots of questions. It's not, is it?
It's not, but I think it can be. And you hit the nail on the head, John. It is a mindset. So think about it like this. You get a phone call from one of your really good friends, and they say, John, can you come and have a beer with me? I'm going through a really tough time right now. I think I'm splitting up with my wife. And your friend's been married for 25 years, so that's a big deal. So you say, where do you want to meet? I'll be there in 20 minutes. Now, you don't need to write down the questions that you're going to ask your friend when you get there. You just intuitively know what you're going to ask and what you're going to say. And the information that they give you, you're going to respond because you're actively listening to that person and you genuinely care about them. And I think if you go into a meeting with a client with that same intent, that you care about this person, you care about doing and helping them in whatever challenge it is that they face, I think naturally the questions will come if you're actively listening and in the moment.
I think you just hit a real important point there. Care about the customer. We're not there in my mind. Yes, we're there to get business. We're there to get an order. We're there to drive revenue. But that's secondary. It needs to be secondary. You talk about mindset. The mindset's got to be, we're there to help the customer. We're there to create value. And therefore we need to prepare properly. We need to understand the value we bring to the table through the conversation, and then bring that value properly through the conversation. And that's nothing to do with talking about product. It's all to do with understanding the customer and asking the right questions and helping the customer in their own mind understand their problems and start formulating a way in which they might be able to address it, irrespective of your product.
Agreed. Yeah, I think if you go in with that helping mindset, you're going to be far more successful in sales than if you go in already knowing what you're going to prescribe. I read this once. I wish I could tell you who said it, but I love it. I use it all the time. And it was, in medicine, prescription without diagnosis is medical malpractice. In sales, prescription without diagnosis is sales malpractice.
And the other thing that, there's a story I tell, and I won't tell the whole story right now, but one of the sales I made in the past, the customer didn't even know what they'd bought. They had purchased, in their own mind, they had purchased something from me that was going to give them an outcome, but it wasn't the product they were buying, it was the outcome that they were committing to achieve. Right. And the CEO got a surprise when I walked in there, and we were talking, selling computers and software back in those days, and I had sold software that was going to help this manufacturing organisation. And the CEO walked past one day as I was working with the IT guys and said, "What are you doing here, John? Good to see you." And I said, "Oh, we're working out where the computer's going to go in this room." And he said, "Does a computer come with this?" He had made the decision. He knew what outcome they wanted, but the product was pretty irrelevant.
Right. But you could have been going in talking about the bits and bytes and the spec of the computer and how fast it was, and
well, the software particularly, all the features and functions of the software, which was really irrelevant. We're in there talking about just-in-time manufacturing and how you could reduce the queues by properly scheduling and all that sort of stuff. And you know, it was almost irrelevant that software made that happen. It was
Absolutely.
what's going to happen and what is the outcome I'm going to achieve. If you can give me that outcome and I'm confident you can give me, I'll sign the check, whatever I get. Hardware, software, it doesn't really matter, right? So
it's interesting, John. The author Jeb Blunt says, "Sales is a language of questions." And I love that quote, and I add to it my own quote. And my own quote is, "You don't outsell the competition, you out-question them." You just ask better questions, you develop a better understanding of their needs, their challenges, and their objectives, and you just put forward the best solution to meet those needs, challenges, and objectives.
And I would add to that, absolutely agree. I would add to that you actually need to be a domain expert to do that, an expert in some aspects of the customer's domain. I'm not talking about product expert aspect of customer, because to have that conversation with the customer and ask the right questions and bring insight through the questions, etc., that's relevant to them, you need to have that domain expertise. And every salesperson I talk to is build that domain expertise, really understand, you know, an area of a customer's domain where you can bring value through the questions you ask, right? And sometimes we have to forget that we know all about our product because the product's not irrelevant, but certainly in the early stages of the consultative sales process, it's pretty irrelevant.
Yeah, you may actually get to the end of the consultative sales process and realize that you yourself have nothing to offer this client except maybe a referral to somebody who can solve their problem. But the reality is you don't want to be pushing a square peg into a round hole or trying to push something that kind of fits. You know, you should be building value and providing a solution that meets their needs.
That said, I'd like to think that we're qualifying early and we've identified pretty early if we're not going to be able to help them and we're not going to waste their time or ours, right? But I agree with you. Yeah, the discussion is nothing about your product early in the sales process. And the first meeting, particularly in B2B environment, the first meeting you have with a client, you should be able to walk in and walk out without ever discussing your company or your product. It's got nothing to do with the meeting.
I agree. And then there's a reason to go back and present all about your organization and your potential solutions in a second meeting.
Or third or fourth or fifth, whatever it takes in that particular deal.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay. Look, thank you very much for that conversation. I think consultative selling, it's been around for quite a while. A lot of people do it well, a lot don't. It's a whole model that we need to really learn and concentrate on and focus on. And once we're there, we can create a lot of value with the customer or for the customer through the conversation. And it's all about the conversation.
Completely agree.
Paul, look forward to the next time. Great discussion, mate.
Fantastic. Thanks for having me, John.